My name is Dr. Harold Isaacs, and I'm Professor Emeritus of History here at the university. And I started this seminar series back in 1981. So we've had quite a few seminars. And this was sort of the seedbed for the founding of the Association of Third World Studies, which is a global professional educational association that emphasizes research, teaching, and publication. And we're going to celebrate our 30th anniversary October 21st, 2003. Well, that's just next month. It's a month away, a little over a month. And that's hard for me to believe. The first was the first annual meeting. We had 2 panels, and the theme was activities of U.S. citizens in the third world. And we had a panel on business and on economics, and we had a panel on religious influences, activities. So, and we had Habitat come out, and they filled up 301. And then it just kept growing. Now we got about 350 members. And we have a journal, Journal of Third World Studies, which we publish twice a year. I've shown it to Tom DeTita. I'll put it back in, but this is the latest issue. So, and this is, something that's good for the university. And in fact, our 31st annual meeting is going to be in India. It used to be Madras, they call it Chennai now, in southern India. And it's going to be December 28th to December 30th. So we'll be there for New Year's. Be taking a tour, actually, New Year's Eve day. But anyhow, go on and on. We have a website if you want to learn about the association. Just type in the browser ATWS, and you'll come to it. It's on the server here at the college. And we appreciate all the support of the college. I want to thank Dr. Smedra and Dr. Tu, first of all, for the willingness to participate in this program this evening. Very important program. And I know it'll be very interesting. And when you take something and you do research that's as practical as they've done, and to help people actually, help people on the ground, that's very significant in alleviating diabetes, help prevent it, and also Dr. Tu is going to talk about obesity, so I'll be interested in that. We have some distinguished guests here this evening. Dr. Richard Hall, who's professor of history, and for several years here, fine scholar, especially on Bulgaria. And Dr. Andronova, I always have trouble with that, call her Nellie. Dr. Nellie.
Dr. Nellie.
Everybody knows who I'm referring to. And then we have here Mr. Tom DeTita, who worked with Dr. Smedra on this community theater project. And Tom is no stranger to Georgia Southwestern because he's been doing community theater for a long time and did several real great plays here when we had that program. Unfortunately, we don't have it anymore. But he's a great playwright and director. So thank you for attending, Tom. And I welcome you, students of Georgia Southwestern State University. A lot of you are probably new here, so that's why I wanted to familiarize you with Third World Studies activities on campus. Well, as I say, we have. I'm going to go on now, and I want to thank our technology program, Channel 16. You know, we tape this and then they televise it locally. Here came in our former Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, Linda Lee Purvis, right over here. I'm so glad you could attend. Well, our first speaker is an individual who has done so much to implement this innovative program of community theater, especially in Fiji. As I say, it is a very unique program, and that's Dr. Smedra, who is one of the outstanding scholars on campus, very active scholar. Got his degree, his BS degree from Pennsylvania State University, and then his MS and PhD degrees in agricultural economics from the University of Georgia. So he saw the right way and came down south. And has had very varied, rich experience. He served in the Peace Corps in Morocco. He has also worked for the Department of Agriculture. He was a professor in the University of South Pacific. And then he has a lot of other academic activities with organizations such as the Association of Third World Studies. He's secretary of our organization. He's also on the editorial board of the Journal of Third World Studies. It's on the Georgia Consortium. He's taught at the American University in Bulgaria. He's taught at several universities in China. He has a lot of awards. The GSW Featured Scholar Award, and Dr. Tu also has won that. And he received a $65,000 grant from the International Diabetes Federation to implement this very unique program using community theater to promote diabetes education and prevention in Fiji. So, Dr. Smedra, welcome for about, I don't know, the 20th time. And please join me in welcoming.
Well, good. Thanks again to Dr. Isaacs for inviting me to talk once again in this series, Third World in Perspective series. You know, we've got something going on campus called the QEP, Quality Enhancement Plan. And that's because of our accreditation, and we need something to demonstrate that we're working toward quality enhancement. you know, this would look better if I turned out the lights. So if everybody promises not to fall asleep,
Just the front row, just the front row. You don't need to turn over one.
you know, I think it's like this way and this way.
Well, that's
So that side of the room gets a good picture, and this side of the room gets a crappy picture.
There we go. Right, and that way the whole room sleeps.
Goes to sleep. Well, you know, I'll try to keep you folks awake, but, you know, the pictures are, I think, nice, so I want you to see the pictures. First off, I want to thank Dr. Isaacs. We've got this QEP in place on campus, and it's called Windows to the World. And what we're trying to do as part of this program is to bring the world into GSW, into Georgia Southwestern, to internationalize the campus more than it already has been internationalized. But Dr. Isaacs has been doing this since 1981. And so we already have this core of internationalization on this campus, thanks to Dr. Isaacs. And I think he's the guy who needs a big round of applause. Okay, so just a little bit of background before I start talking about our project in Fiji. As Dr. Isaacs mentioned, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco. I left Washington, D.C., where I was working for USDA, and went to Morocco, and my life changed. If you talk about Peace Corps service, and you talk to people that have returned from Peace Corps service, every one of them, there are about 160,000 of them now, since 1962, when the first Peace Corps people went to Ghana. 160,000 of them, every one of them will say that their life has changed because of Peace Corps. And back 20 years ago, my life changed because of Peace Corps. I did my 2 years of service, I came back to the United States, I went back to USDA in Washington, and I thought I needed to do something else. And that other thing was live someplace else. And so I applied to the University of the South Pacific. They offered me a job as a senior lecturer, which is the equivalent of an associate professor. They have a British system, so senior lecturer is associate professor in economics, in their economics department. I took that and left, 1996, which is getting to be a few years ago now, 17 years ago. And you know, there was teaching and also research. And one of the things I wanted to do, the things that I was working on at USDA was pesticides. And I frightened my macro and micro classes about the pesticides that are used around here, because we're in the middle of a cotton patch here, and cotton requires a great deal of insecticides. But so I frightened you about that. And one of the things I did when I came to Fiji was to wonder how the herbicides that they were using on sugarcane, which is their principal crop for export, affected sugarcane farmers. That was the first thing that I did. And then after that, I kind of expanded into more public health research. The second thing that we did, when I say we, I'm talking about the royal we. The second thing that I did was look at what are called non-communicable diseases. Things like cancer and heart disease and cardiovascular disease and diabetes, and how economic development in the Pacific is affected by these diseases. This region of the world, I'll have a map here in just a minute, this region of the world is affected very significantly by these kinds of developed world diseases. As these countries have become richer, they've become bigger. And as you become bigger, you become more prone to illnesses that the developed world becomes sick from and dies from. So one of the things that I thought, after thinking about diabetes and thinking about how governments in the region don't have a clue about what to do about it. It's an epidemic. Diabetes is an epidemic. And what the government does is, you know, they provide pamphlets and posters saying eat right, but a lot of people are illiterate in the region. They can't read. And so the government all they're doing is things that don't have any impact on the population. So what possibly could have an impact? Maybe theater would have an impact. And again, I want to recognize Tom DeTita, who is our playwright in this project, and I thank him for being here. This is a picture of We initiated the project in June of this year. So I was in Fiji. We brought the play that Tom had written to Fiji, and these are the initial group of people that we are working with. There were 65 people there. I'll explain the methodology of the program as soon as I give you a bit more introduction. But this picture is a picture of the initial group of people that we are working with. Here's a map of the region. One of the great things about being a faculty member at the University of the South Pacific is the university is considered to be a Commonwealth university. So there are 12 countries in the Pacific region that provide money to run the university. Fiji is one of those countries. And the other countries, well, I'm not going to name all 12, but one of the things that they like faculty members to do is to do summer schools in these other countries. So I had the great good fortune of spending 2 to 3 months in the here's Fiji, the Solomon Islands. I spent 3 months in Tonga, in Samoa, in the Cook Islands, in Kiribati, and in Nauru. So I've lived, more than simply traveled, but I've actually lived in this region and have gotten to know the people, and they are the sweetest people in the world. And it's doubly troubling that they're afflicted by these kinds of illnesses. Here's a map of Fiji, and I'll have the same map a little bit later in the presentation, just to kind of get you familiar with the country that we are working in. Fiji is an archipelago, meaning a whole collection of islands. There are 330 islands that make up the island nation of Fiji. 110 of them are inhabited, meaning there are 220 of them that don't have any water. And so people have aggregated on 110 of those islands. Most people, 90% of the population of Fiji, which is 900,000 people, live on the 2 principal islands. Viti-Levu, where the capital is, Suva, where I lived for 4 years, and Vanuatu, where our project is based. It's based in a town called Lambasa. You see it up here. Lambasa has about 27,000 people. Suva, the peri-urban region around Suva, has about 300,000 people. About 1/3 of the population of the country lives in the city of Suva and the region around Suva. And the reason for that is, like any developing country, lots of people have come to the city to find work because working on the farm is not doing it anymore. It's a monetized economy. You need to make some money. The only place to make money is in the city. So Suva is the principal population center. The second biggest city is Lautoka, which is on the western side. The international airport is in Nadi. So there's a map of Fiji. So you walk through these countries, walk through the principal avenue in Suva called Victoria Parade, or in Beso, B-E-T-I-O, Beso. That is the urban aggregation, not really a city. It's the urban aggregation on the island of Tarawa, which is the capital island of the country of Kiribati. And the people in Kiribati pronounce T-I as an O. That's why that's called Beso. Apia is the capital of Samoa. Lambasa, I just pointed out, is the biggest city on Vanuatu. Nuku'alofa is the capital of the Kingdom of Tonga, where I spent 3 months. And Noumea is the capital of New Caledonia, which is one of the colonial provinces of France. So you walk through this region, doesn't matter what country you're in, you walk through the region and you see, it's astounding the number of big people that live there. And the reason for that is, one reason is there's a genetic disposition to gain weight among these people. There was a mass migration out of Asia 4,000 years ago. People have populated the Pacific since 2000 BC. So people have lived in this region for about 4,000 years, and they came from Asia. They came through Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, got in boats, went out and populated all these islands in the Pacific. And the people that survived were the ones who could store fat. If you couldn't store fat effectively, you died on the sea voyages. The people who survived were able to store fat effectively. And unfortunately, that's the situation with their survivors. They store fat very easily. And so you have many, many large people in this region. Didn't used to be that way. This is a picture of Fijians at the end of the 19th century, about 1880. They were lean, they were strong, they were handsome, and their diets consisted of fish, vegetables, and whatever game they could find. These people were warriors. Fijians especially. Fijians, Tongans, Samoans. You know, we talk about rugby now, although that's not big in the United States, but probably the best players come from this region of the world. They're warriors. The United Nations uses a great many Fijian military in its peacekeeping operation because they are warriors. But they were much leaner, much more effective warriors back when these illnesses that they're now afflicted with didn't exist prior to the monetization of their economies. Now, unfortunately, they're afflicted with diabetes and high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease and kidney disease, all kinds of things that we know about. People in your families have fallen victim to these illnesses. And now people, not now, but over the past 50 years, people in this region have now also fallen victim to these same kind of illnesses. And governments in the region don't know what to do. This is the market in, the central market in Apia, Samoa, the capital of Samoa. So beginning in the 1960s, a wage economy developed. People wanted to work for money rather than fishing, farming, and hunting. Lots of people coming to the city. Fishing, farming, and hunting is not, you can't do that in the city. And so a wage economy developed. They became reliant on imported food. And that imported, typically canned food, because of the long sea voyages. You put stuff in cans. There wasn't much access to fresh vegetables or even fresh meat. Everything was frozen or canned. And typically when you put something in a can, it has to be, you have to put a lot of sodium in it. And therefore these people began ingesting high levels of sugar and fat and cholesterol and salt. And what happened was a mortality transition occurred. Public health mortality transition means people started dying, getting sick, and dying of the kinds of diseases that we know about in the West, rather than infectious diseases. People began dying of these non-communicable diseases, or what we sometimes call lifestyle diseases. Now, diabetes. The WHO, the World Health Organization, estimates there are about 370 million people in the world that suffer from diabetes. Every one of you knows somebody who has diabetes. Typically, it's a disease of elderly people. As you get older, your bodily functions begin to become decrepit, including your pancreas, which produces insulin, which breaks down sugar in your blood. So typically, diabetes in the past was a disease of the elderly. You know, once you look at age patterns of diabetes, people beyond the age of 70, about 80% of everybody has diabetic tendencies. But unfortunately, in this region of the world, many, many people are becoming diabetic at a much younger age. The number of people in the Western Pacific, 30 million, includes Australia and New Zealand. The number of people that will be diabetic, or are diabetic and will be diabetic, will double in the next 20 years. The epidemic is not just in this region of the world, it's an epidemic here in the United States. In the US, about 8% of the adult population is diabetic. There are about 25 million diabetics in the US. The biggest population of diabetics, where do you think the biggest population of people with diabetes exists? China. There are about 120 million Chinese that are diabetic. And the percentage is about the same as in the United States. So here's some numbers. This is a guy on Tarawa, which is the capital island of Fiji, and he's doubly afflicted here. I don't know whether he's diabetic, but he's got a cigarette in his mouth. So that doesn't bode well for the future. 40% of adult population on Nauru, which is a one-island country right on the equator. 40% of the adult population is sick with diabetes. I spent 3 months in Nauru teaching, and you walk in the urban aggregation called Vieasuring, which would be considered the capital, and it's obvious that this population is sick with diabetes. It's truly amazing. It's an amazing place to visit. 25% of Fijians. Fiji is an interesting country because the population is divided between native Fijians, Melanesian people, black-skinned people, and Indians that were brought to Fiji by the British. It was the colonial power up until 1970. They brought Indians from South India to Fiji to work in the sugarcane industry, the sugarcane fields, because they didn't want to disturb the tribal life of native Fijians. So the country is an interesting one. It's the only one in this region that has a population that's split almost 50-50 in indigenous Fijian people and Indian people, Indo-Fijians. 25% of Fijians are diabetic, both populations. Doesn't matter whether you look at indigenous Fijians or Indian Fijians, both of them have this rate of diabetes. 10% of the Kiribati, which is what they call themselves. We call ourselves Americans. They call themselves Kiribati. Again, TI is pronounced as an S in their language. 20% of the men in Nauru and Kiribati and 50% of women died due to non-communicable diseases before the age of 40. When we think of the South Pacific, we think of paradise. We think of palm trees and sandy beaches and a place maybe that you go on a honeymoon. You're not going to the Caribbean or Niagara Falls or Las Vegas. But there are some underlying problems that are potentially catastrophic. Cardiovascular disease affects 20%, 27% of the women on Kiribati. In Fiji, the progression of the disease has been essentially unbelievable. In 1990, 6% of the adult population of Fiji was diabetic. In the year 2000, 12% of the population was diabetic. In 2012, 25% of the population is diabetic. And the government does not know what to do about this, to arrest this epidemic. And it is an epidemic. You look at the trend in diabetes incidence, and it's an epidemic. They don't have a clue. What they do know is that, I thought this is one of my photos just walking in the streets of Suva. I just kind of popped into a fast food place. And I thought, because this shocks me, but I'm sure it wouldn't shock you. All I have to do is go to a Braves game and you see the same kind of stuff. I mean, you folks are eating the same kind of stuff. The difference is that we know that eating this stuff every day is not good for us. You know, sausages and fried chicken and fried fish and French fries and fried who knows what. We know that this is bad for us. You know, once in a while you go to a Braves game, you have a hot dog and some French fries, okay. But people eat this stuff every day. And the difference is they don't know that this stuff is bad for them. They don't know. So it's a compelling reason to try to provide these individuals information, education about their lifestyles and what it's doing to their lives and the potential for longevity. They're dying young because this is what they're eating. I was walking past, these are all pictures from June visit to Fiji when we started the project. This is in Suva. You can see the Vodafone Arena in the back here. This is right across the street from the University of the South Pacific. And there was some kind of a religious revival going on. And anytime there's a big crowd of people, and religion is very important in Fiji. It's predominantly Methodist. There's some Mormons there now, and of course there's Hindus and some Muslims, the Indian population, but mostly Methodists. And people take religion very, very seriously. Anytime you have a group of people, a large group of people coming together, food sellers will line up. There are about 30 of these booths, these kiosks that were frying up this stuff. People love it. I mean, you know, you folks love it. You folks love fried food. You can fry anything up. You can fry up the Sunday paper, and it would taste good, I think. You know, put a little breading on it, deep fry it, and there you are. Tastes kind of like eggplant parmesan, sort of. They call this stuff barbecue. This is another view of what these folks are eating. And they lick their fingers for it. They love it. And this is the stuff that's killing them. And they're happy because they don't know it's killing them. These folks are happy. You know, these are young folks who, they're all three of them Fijian. You can see the mix of races. This young fellow on the right is essentially a pureblood Fijian, and these other two young people, Fiji is a mix of the British, white blood, and also Chinese, Asian blood. And so the mix of people is really, really interesting. And they're happy. They want you to buy these sausages and this, whatever this stuff is. They're happy. They don't know that this contributes to this plague of diabetes. And the problem is, I mentioned that diabetes is a plague of older people, but now, in this region of the world, a lot of younger people in their 30s, are falling sick from diabetes. And once you fall sick from diabetes, you stay sick, pretty much, in this region. You know, you take your insulin when you go to the clinic. Medical care is free throughout the region, which is why it's a big drag on the budgets of the countries in this region. The health ministries are spending, I have a slide here that says that they're spending about 70% of their budget to treat diabetics. So when you fall sick from diabetes, all kinds of bad things happen. Diabetes leads to neuropathy, meaning your nerves they become desensitized. And what happens typically in countries where people don't wear shoes, a lot of people don't wear shoes, even in the city in Fiji. Something cuts your foot and you don't know it's been cut. An infection develops, gangrene sets in, and bang, that limb is amputated. And once a limb is amputated, there's not much you can do to help the family. You know, many of these communities are just that, they're communal, and if someone loses a leg or becomes blind because of retinopathy or some of the other problems that diabetes causes, the community can help, but it can't take the place of essentially a breadwinner. So people become thrown into poverty if in fact a limb is lost. Paul Zimmet, who's the statesman of diabetes research in the region, he's Australian, and has been working on diabetes for the past 50 years, diabetes research. This is a quote that I thought was very apropos for our talk tonight. What AIDS was in the last 20 years of the 20th century, diabetes is going to be in the first 20 years of this century. It's wiping out Nauru, the Marshall Islands, Tonga, name any island, and diabetes is its main health threat. Okay, that kind of makes you sit up and take notice. That the guy that's been doing research for 50 years in diabetes recognizes that this is a huge, huge problem. People that are involved in economic development, and every developed country has got teams of people that they send to the developing world. In the past, their focus has been on what development people focus on, development economists focus on. That is infrastructure, roads, railroads, institutional capacity, making sure that the government can do what it needs to do to help an economy grow, promoting good governance, democracy, all those things. It's only been in the last 10 years that this focus on health. I mean, if people are sick, then an economy is not going to grow. So now the focus is more toward making sure that populations are healthy. Many populations, as I mentioned, are illiterate. So all the brochures and the posters that ministries of health put up in hospitals and clinics, people don't bother to look at. The only reason someone would look at this poster is because it has attractive young girls in it in skimpy bathing suits. And this is from, my guess is from French Polynesia, either New Caledonia or Tahiti. And it says, La vie sans tabac, j'aime. I love life without tobacco. Okay, nobody reads this, and all they're doing is kind of looking at these young women. So, what's happening typically by governments is to attempt to lecture to people, and that typically doesn't work. In this kind of a setting, we like to think it works in education, but not in public health education. This top-down kind of lecturing to people simply doesn't work. So what do governments do? Well, they treat people. They spend most of their budgets on providing treatment, buying medication, and setting up clinics, and trying to populate those clinics with doctors. There aren't a lot of doctors, nurses, and so people have someplace to go when they become sick, or someplace to go regularly to test their blood sugar to see whether they need some insulin to get that blood sugar level low. And this figure that I mentioned, many of these countries spend up to 70% of their health budgets on treating diabetes, just treating, which means that governments are overwhelmed by the disease. They can't even start to do any kind of effective education because all of their resources are targeted toward the treatment of people that are already sick. So we need more effective educational policies and programs to deal with this epidemic. Community theater. All of these folks love performance. It's part of the heritage of every country in the region. You know, as a tourist, if you go to Fiji, the first thing you see if you stay in a touristy place is Fijian dancers dressed in, grass skirts and with war paint and war bonnets on, and it's one of the things that people come to these islands to see. They're all about pageant. They're all about performance. So I thought, why not try to do community theater to get the message of healthy lifestyles across to people who are already diabetic and how to make a better life for themselves. Or if you're not diabetic, how to avoid becoming diabetic. These are Samoans. So here's a young Samoan woman, there's a middle-aged Samoan woman. And the other problem here in this region is that the perception of beauty, feminine beauty here, is associated with weight. The bigger you become, the more beautiful you are in the eyes of the male population. So you've got another hurdle to kind of surmount if you're trying to convince people that they should not gain weight. Well, the perception of beauty is such that women want to become big as soon as they possibly can in order to attract a male, in order to get married. So, this is another photo of the folks that saw our first presentation in June of this year. So our previous work, and I mentioned that we did some work on non-communicable diseases in Fiji, Nauru, Kiribati, and Samoa. And we asked people, again, this was how NCDs, non-communicable diseases, affect the economic development. And we asked people, do you read? We did questionnaires, and we asked them, there were the population combined in all these countries, the people that we spoke to was about 500 people, which is a pretty big survey. We asked them, among other things, whether they read the literature that ministries of health provided to give them education about these different illnesses. And hardly anybody read them, which indicates kind of a passivity in the population. Some people, have the attitude, God's will be done. If I'm sick, God willed it, and whatever happens, happens. They've made their peace with God. So there has to be other ways to provide this message of healthy lifestyles to these individuals. Also, during that earlier research, I watched personally, because we were doing part of my job was to do the interviews. We watched hundreds of people just sitting quietly, waiting to be seen by either a nurse or a physician, typically a nurse, because there weren't that many physicians, one or two in a clinic. And I thought that, you've got hundreds of people here, it's kind of a captive audience. Wouldn't it be good to bring actors to the people that were waiting, and with an effective play, we can start to get this message of healthy lifestyles across to this population. And that's exactly what's happening here. These are the actors that are performing Mr. Tita's play. We have, they're all young people, all recruited from Lambasa, and we have a young man in a wheelchair. He doesn't look so young because they put cornstarch in his hair. And he's also sitting on his leg, sitting on one of the legs, so he looks like an amputee. We have a male nurse. We have a market vendor. I have some more pictures of her, of the entire performance. And we have a captive audience, and they were really, really interested. So, I don't know whether this is going to work. It started in June. It's going until, we're funded until January of 2015. So the plan is that we will go back in December with a new play from Mr. Kita. And between June and December, this group of actors, this acting troupe, will come back every month and perform this same play. And then in December, we'll introduce a new play, and then the troupe of actors will come back to the same hospital, Lambasa Hospital in Lambasa, and perform this in front of this group of people. What we did was, and I have pictures here, this is another view of the people watching the play. And the text here just demonstrates a bit of what community theater is supposed to do. Being ill is something that's very, very personal. And usually people don't really like to talk about their illnesses. And so people come and they're quiet and they maybe talk to the doctor or talk to the nurse, but it's a very personal business. And I think probably the way to help a great many of these people is to make it a community issue. Their illness is going to be a community issue. And there's some aspects of community theater where the people that are affected actually take part in the theater. We haven't gotten there yet, and maybe Tom will come up with a play in which the people that are watching will actually be interactive. We'll see. So again, we had a big crowd of folks that were rapt. Rapt meaning they were focused on what was going on. It was funny, it was sad, it was excellent, I thought. Kudos to Tom DeTita. What we eventually hope to happen is that when this project ends in January of 2015, that the Fiji government, the Ministry of Health in Fiji, will fund its continuation. And if in fact it funds the continuation, what we hope is that we will recruit teams of actors, acting groups, that will be in different locations in Fiji. We'll bring them down to, we won't bring them down, but we'll create acting cells in the big urban areas of Fiji, in Suva and in Lautoka. And in that way, we will reach more people. We decided to be in Lambasa because it's a place where there isn't a great deal of entertainment. So I thought that Lambasa would be ideal because people would be really, really interested. And they are, they were, they continue to be. So, community theater lends itself to enfranchisement. This voice is given to people who don't have a voice. The sick are the underclass of society. We try not to. Life is about living, and it's about living it to the fullest. And these people that are sick are trying to manage their lives every day, and they're quiet about it because we don't want to hear. Healthy people don't want to hear about sick people. This is a way that sick people can actually give voice to their frustrations and their depressions. Depression is a significant part of diabetes. A great percentage of people that in fact are diabetic face depression or suffer from depression. And we can offer these people this message of a healthy lifestyle. Another view of the venue at the Mombasa Hospital. So what we want to do is engage the community and learn from it. It's a long-term process. We don't expect miracles to happen in the next 18 months. What we've done, the methodology of the thing is these people saw the presentation, and then after the presentation, we interviewed them. I have a photo of that. We interviewed them, student enumerators, talked to everybody that was there, and then they had their blood drawn in order to determine what their baseline blood sugar levels were. And then what we're going to do every 6 months is do exactly the same thing. We're going to administer a questionnaire, and we're going to draw their blood. And we're going to see, these questionnaires are kind of their lifestyle questionnaires, to see whether they have improvement in their quality of life based on what they've learned in these presentations, in these skits, in these plays. Again, this is a map of Fiji. We're up in Mombasa, at the Mombasa Hospital. We have a control in the town of Ba, at the Ba Methodist Hospital. You know, when you do research, this kind of research, you have to be able to compare the people that you're trying to influence with some control group that's not being exposed to theater. We decided to do that, excuse me, in Ba, because the demographics of Ba were very similar to the demographics of Mombasa. You saw from the pictures that I've shown you that the great majority of the people that were at the clinic were Indian, not native Fijian. When we went to Ba, I'll show you a picture of the hospital in just a few minutes. Unfortunately, we didn't have a great many people show up at the diabetes clinic. So in the next round in December, we're going to go to Suva, to the big municipal hospital in Suva. It's the biggest hospital in the region, not just Fiji, but the entire Pacific region. If I actually fall over one of these chairs, just let me, get up on myself. So rather than Ba, although it's a beautiful place, population of about 17,000, but we're going to go to Suva because we're absolutely certain that we'll have hundreds of people coming to the diabetic clinic. Only 17 people came to our Ba diabetic clinic, and that wasn't enough. This is a picture of Mombasa, the main drag. It's a one-street town. Mr. Tatita will verify that this is, in fact, Mombasa. 17,000 people, one commercial street. And that's very, very common in Fiji. It's very common throughout the region. You've got this one commercial street with all the businesses. It's about, I don't know, maybe a kilometer long, maybe a little bit longer, 1,000 yards. And then there are houses on this side of the area and houses on this side. That's it. That's life. This is the Mombasa Hospital up on a hill. It's Vanua Levu is very agrarian. It's all in sugarcane. That's what that crop is in the back here, and it's just made up of farmers. There's a cow herd with her milk cows. And this is kind of strange. These are Fijians. All of these folks are Fijians. Coming across this railroad bridge, there's a railroad in Mombasa because there's a sugar mill there. And so the trains are very, very small. Kind of like these trains you get on in kiddie parks. And they're sugar trains. So farmers load up their sugar cane onto these trains, and those trains go to the sugar mill and they drop them off and go back and get some more. And these folks decided, I took the picture from the main bridge that goes across this river. But these folks, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, so they decided not to take the safe bridge. And what they're doing is, I'm sure, is traumatizing their children. So the Minister of Health in Fiji I talked with him a couple of times, and he's very, very excited about this project. Who wouldn't be? The things that they're doing now aren't working. And so anytime someone comes in even from overseas, and explains that this is what we're going to do, we're going to try to address this problem that you have that your folks aren't having any success with, he was all for it. There are 3 diabetes hub hospitals in Fiji. Lambasa is a hub where everybody who's diabetic on that entire island of Vanuatu has to come for treatment. And that involves, Vanuatu is reasonably big. The big island of Fiji, Viti is about the size of the island of Hawaii, the main island of Hawaii. So, it takes a while for people to get to the diabetes hub. There are 2 hubs on Viti, the principal island of Fiji. One is at Suva at the Colonial War Memorial Hospital, very, very big hospital. And the other one is across on the other side of the island in the town of Lautoka. So we're going to use theater to get the message across of healthy lifestyles. Here are our actors, and here is Dr. Mohit Prasad, who is at the USP theater department, although it's not really a theater department. But he's the director of the play that Tom DeTita put together, and these are our actors, all young people, not all Fijian, some are Indo-Fijian, I'll point those folks out. And before the initial presentation, so there's a little intimidating. They didn't have a great deal of time to rehearse. Here's our market vendor, and she's got all this stuff that is not good for diabetics. She's got soda pop, and she's got potato chips, and she's got other kinds of sweets and candies, and she rolls her cart into this staging area, and starts talking and saying that, this is what she has for sale. And you folks don't look sick. Most diabetics don't look sick, especially when they're newly diagnosed. They don't look sick. So why don't you have some soda, or why don't you have some Cheetos or some chips? Because you look like you need a little bit of nourishment. And she's trying to convince this woman, young woman, another actor, to do exactly that. Have one of these, or buy one from me. And here's our guy in the wheelchair again, who has a little soliloquy that says, I should have paid attention. I should have taken my diabetes seriously, and I didn't. And as a result, I'm now an amputee. They had to take off my leg, and I'm becoming blind because of this high sugar in my blood that has destroyed my optic nerve, my retinopathy. And here's another actor who's portraying a nurse who's saying that, telling the vendor to skedaddle, get out of here. This young fellow is a rugby player, and his role is to tell people that, I was a diabetic. And one of the ways to deal with diabetes is to exercise, which people don't do in this region. There's no exercise going on here. So he's here with his rugby ball and his rugby kit, saying that all you need to do, not all you need to do, you need to change your life. And one of the things that you need to do when you change your life is to include a bit of exercise. He said that he was diabetic, but he's not diabetic now because he's included exercise in his life. And these are, again, some scenes of people watching the play. Another one of people watching the play. This is Dr. Mua, who is Fijian and was the head of the diabetes clinic when we were there. He's talking to an Iraqi doctor, Dr. Assad. And these are all medical staff in the back, and these are people that we talked to after the presentation. This is Nurse Miriama, who was the head nurse in the diabetes clinic on the day that we were there. And she was very, very helpful. And she's pretty. And these are our enumerators, people that talk to people with our questionnaires. They're all, let's see, the 4 in the back are Indo-Fijian, they're Indians, and these 3 people are Fijians, native Fijians. And it's important to have both groups because there are many people, everybody speaks English here. Everybody understands English because it was a British colony. But there are a lot of Indian people that don't speak English all that well. So the Indian students ask questions in Hindi, which is the language that they use. Here's Dr. Mua again. He's explaining to the group before the presentation actually occurs what's about to happen. Because these people weren't informed. You know, they came for a regular diabetes day, and now he's telling them in English what's about to happen. The other fellow is Dr. Anand Chand, who's one of my co-researchers. He's at the University of the South Pacific. I've known him since I was there. I've known him for 17 years. And he's about to do a translation of what Dr. Mua has said. Even though everybody understands English, it's better if you have a Hindi speaker to talk to Indo-Fijians in essentially their native language. And here are our enumerators talking to the people that witnessed the presentation directly after the presentation. And after they were finished with the questionnaires, then they went into a room adjacent and they had their blood drawn, just to get a baseline to see where we start from. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow 250 people, 150 that are going to be witnessing the presentation, and another 100 that are going to be in the control. That is, every 6 months we'll draw blood from them, we'll ask them questions, but they won't have the benefit of seeing the play. And we'll use some lifestyle profile questionnaires to get at whether in fact their lives have changed over 18 months. And hopefully they have. Improvement in day-to-day existence. We're hoping that that's what happens. This is the Ba Methodist Hospital. The moral of this story is don't get sick in Ba. And these are our enumerators. Again, we went to Ba to talk to people that came to the diabetes clinic but didn't have exposure to the presentation. It was our control, but we're going to move it. So these are 2 Fijian enumerators who spoke Fijian to some of the people. And this woman is Fijian, this woman is Indo-Fijian. And we had 2 more, 2 Indian students that were enumerators.
Sure.
We about done?
Yeah. It's almost done.
Okay, I'm about done.
Yeah.
Sorry. And here are the enumerators talking to the people at Ba. Some more. Okay, this is a picture of 2 women in Nauru. And Nauru has, as you recall, the highest percentage of diabetes incidence in the world, 40% of the adult population. What needs to happen is, in the entire region, is healthy lifestyles need to be promoted. There needs to be more physical education programs geared toward adults, public official demonstrations of healthy living. The King of Tonga, very famously, in the 1980s, King of Tonga weighed 200 kilos. That's about 440 pounds. He decided to lose weight. And everybody in Tonga, at the same time, decided to lose weight. He lost 100 pounds. And thousands of pounds were lost by the people of Tonga while the king was losing weight. The king died a couple of years ago at the ripe old age of 88. And even though, he lost weight, but he gained it right back after he stopped his diet. The reason why he lived to be 88, because he was the king. He was the king of Tonga. So when he got sick, they put him on an airplane and they shipped him to Australia. It got him all the best medicine that Australia had to offer. Unfortunately, his people don't have that luxury. They fall sick and they die early. So, sponsoring active lifestyle events. These people are very open to any kind of event. I was in Nauru when we took the picture, and for one of our, I'll be just like one more minute, for one of our research projects, and I was invited by the Minister of Health in Nauru, he was a student of mine, to run in a race that they had. I asked the guy, how long is the race? He said he didn't know. So I showed up the next morning, and there were 1,500 people waiting to run a race that nobody knew how long that race was. It finally turned out to be about 8 kilometers, about 5 miles. I came in 6th out of 1,800 people. Of course, everybody else, my competitors, were 7 to 10 years old. So I beat a lot of kids. And that's the point. Once you get out of school, then that's it as far as physical education goes. There needs to be more done for adults. What we hear, we forget. What we see, we remember. What we do, we understand. What you want is to involve people in this public health education, and we think that community theater is a good way to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smedra. That was really excellent. Just hope that funding continues. Really important work. Our respondent is not unfamiliar to students here at Southwestern. Dr. Tu's excellent background. She got BS from Baylor University, PhD from Texas A&M, and went over to Birmingham, Alabama, and taught at Jefferson Community College and the University of Alabama in Birmingham. She's an expert in microbiology. She also teaches bacteriology. She was a featured scholar, just like Phil was, and won professional development grants and all kinds of awards. And we're really honored to have her as a respondent. And she's going to, I believe, talk about obesity. I'm going to listen real closely.
Do you want the lights on?
Let me check real quick to make sure that, I don't know how well you can see. Can you see that? Yes. You want light on or off? Off? Okay, well, do. How do you do this thing?
No.
Okay, I'm going to approach it from the worldwide standpoint in terms of obesity being a global crisis, right? And after that, I think we're going to veer off a little bit. Since I'm a biologist, I'm going to bring in the nutritional part of it. And I want you to be aware because, like Dr. Zimmet said, we know it's going to kill us if we eat all these rich foods. But do you really know? And you're going to see when I start pointing out some of these things that you should look at on your nutritional fact, right? So I'm going to, and hopefully mine shouldn't take more than 10, 15 minutes, so hopefully you can stay awake for it. All right? So worldwide obesity has doubled since 1980, okay? And in 2008, about 1.4 billion adults aged 20 and over were overweight. Now, out of those, 200 million were men and nearly 300 women were obese. Now, what criteria do they use to differentiate between overweight and obesity? If you have a body mass index greater or equal to 25, you are considered overweight. If you have a body mass index greater or equal to 30, you are considered obese. You can get it online, get a BMI calculator, body mass index calculator, figure it out for yourself, you put your weight, your height in there, it'll give you a healthy range. Now, if you fall out of that, you're going to see if you're healthy or not, all right? Or you can go to the doctor, and the doctor can do this for you, okay? So I'm going to skip some of this because obviously Dr. Zimmet has talked about some of it. About 65% of the world's population live in countries where overweight and obesity is a serious problem. Right? And it's more of a problem now because it's more than being hungry. Right? Starvation usually is a problem. But now being overweight and obese will kill people faster. Right? And in 2011, more than 40 million children under the age of 5 were overweight. And they're expecting right now that for the first time, the children will die before their parents, which is again due to the type of food that we're eating. All right, this is the health data that was published in 2012 by the OECD, and that stands for Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. As you can see here, there's a list of many countries, not all of them are listed, but I just figured it would give you an idea. From Japan all the way to the United States. And this is obesity rate from 1990, 2000, and 2010. As you can see, there's an increased rate of obesity straight through all these countries here, with the greatest obesity rate in the US. All right, so obesity is a serious health issue. Okay, it's the 5th leading risk for global death. At least 2.8 million adults die each year as a result of being overweight or obese. All right, and that's because why? Many of these countries like India, China, a lot of these countries are adopting what we call the Western lifestyle. Okay, we're eating more processed food. And I'll talk to you about the nutritional part of it. All right? And so the impact is a serious impact. Okay? For the first time, and this is what Dr. Zimmet said before, non-communicable disease that's associated with obesity, like cancer, heart attack, stroke, diabetes, those are all complications due to being overweight. Okay? And that is going to affect the quality of our life. We are all living longer. You know that because of the technology and the medicine. But the problem is, do you have a quality life? You're living longer, but you're burdened with all these types of chronic illness, and I'm going to show you some of the chronic illness that you're going to get. All right? So you got to be aware of what is it that you're eating on a regular basis. All right, let me go ahead and tell you this also. And the non-communicable disease, they're expected to cost in the next 20 years $30 trillion. And again, it's going to have an economic impact. All right, this is a list, and I run out of room, so obviously you're not going to list too many. We're just going to give you an idea of all the issues that are associated with being overweight or obese. So we already talked about high cholesterol and high triglyceride level, type 2 diabetes, which Dr. Zimmet will talk about, high blood pressure, metabolic disorder. You have high blood glucose, high cholesterol, okay, heart disease, stroke. You have increased risk of different types of cancer. Prostate cancer, cervical cancer, breast cancer. There's a whole bunch of cancer that you're more susceptible to. You will have more trouble sleeping, sleep disorders, sleep apnea, depression. In fact, today, when I drive in today, they said that there's a study going on right now, and they found that people who are overweight are more likely to be depressed. All right? And you're going to feel shame. Also, you feel ostracized by society because you're overweight, and you hear that all the time. You don't get a job because you're obese. All right? So it's not just, it's the quality of your life is affected in many ways. All right? You will have gallbladder issues. You'll have fertility issue for men and women. Okay? You'll have fatty liver diseases. And also, if you eat a lot of these type of food, it's going to lower your ability to fight infection. All right? So your immune system will be affected. All right? And so you're more susceptible to inflammation, okay, osteoarthritis, and of course your ability to skin issues such as wound healing. You have a slower process. You can't heal as quickly. All right, so what can we do? That's bad. But what are some of the things that we can do? You can prevent it. You don't have to live through this. All right? If you have diabetes, and I have friends, like he said, that have diabetes, and they're on all kinds of medication. But once they realize they have that issue and they watch, they eat, they exercise, they do all kinds of the right things, all of a sudden all the medication stops, they go back to normal, and their life is normal. You don't have to live with this kind of chronic issue, right? And that's up to you. You can prevent it, but you have to be aware of what you put in your mouth every day when you go out there to eat, right? And we are a fast food society. It's convenient, it's fast, it's cheap. So we all are guilty of it. I'm guilty, all right? But you've got to make sure if you're going to eat a fattening meal, then you need to crank up your exercise level, all right? So lifestyle choices are what's going to determine how you are going to feel, okay? So the two things, I'm going to get a little bit into the nutrition part of it, and I want to, and again, it's a little bit science, but not too much, all right? So the type of food that you eat, there's two terms I want you guys to think about, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more. Macronutrient and micronutrient. All right? When you hear macronutrient, these are things like your fat molecules, your carbohydrate, your protein. All right? And all the food that he pointed out, the sausages, the French fries, they're full of fat, carbohydrate, and protein. Okay? What happened is we have an imbalance. Instead of just having a balance between macronutrient and micronutrient, which is going to be considered things like your vitamins, your minerals, your plant chemical, what we call phytochemical. They come from plants, antioxidant. These are the micronutrients. You just need trace amount of it in your diet. And what it's going to do is it's going to balance out that, and also it helps your body to work optimally. And what happened is when we go toward the macronutrient and we processed food completely remove sometimes all the micronutrients. So you end up on this side. It's an imbalance situation. All right? You're taking in all these foods, what we call empty calories. That means they're high fat, high sugar, high protein's good, all right? But they don't have much micronutrient. Okay? And so processed food remove a lot of the important things that you need. Versus natural food, which is your fruit and vegetable, right? Those are better for you, but we're not eating that, okay? Not as much, okay? And there's another thing that have changed since the 1900s, and they have seen the food side, right? The portion has gotten larger. It used to be your plate is small and your food maybe your palm size, like here, okay? Now you look at your food, you know, what's a famous phrase when you go to fast food restaurant? Would you like to supersize that? And I'll tell you something funny, because I went into one of the fast food restaurants one day, and I decided I'm going to be adventurous, but in time being healthy, so I'm going to buy a combo meal. Okay? And that's my idea of adventure, right? So I went in there and I just said, I want a combo. And she looked at me and she said, large or small? And I'm like, large or small what? There's some sandwich, there's the French fry, and there's a drink. Which one are you referring to? And she was like, it's the drink. And I said, well, small. And then I want to make sure she's going to give me small everything, because I definitely don't want to supersize all three things. So I said small all the way across. And I feel like I was back talking to her, but I wasn't trying to, because I was trying to figure out why is it, everywhere you go, you have to supersize. We got to the point where we supersize our food, and we are now supersized ourselves. Right? It makes sense. And so you got to think about these issues. Okay, and like Dr. Zimmet said, we eat a lot of calories, right? More calories, and your calories on a day should be around 2,000 kilocalories per day. But we're taking in a lot more than that. Some of us could take in easily 3,000, 4,000 without thinking twice about it. And then how much exercise do you get? Because of the technology, with computers, games, walls, TV, we're sitting in front of everything we're eating. We're not even conscious that we're eating. We're just eating potato chips as soon as we sit in front of the TV or whatever it is that we want to do. All right? You're not even going and walking. You're driving everywhere. You're going from the dorm to class. And the dorm is like half a mile or a quarter of a mile or 5 minutes to walk to. All right? And you're driving. So you have a sedentary lifestyle on top of that. So you have a whole bunch of calories that you take in, but you don't burn up anything because all we do is sit. So there is an imbalance. Again, going toward fat, protein, carbohydrate, and less exercise. All right? All right, so what can we do to balance calories to manage our weight? If you are obese or overweight, you need to reduce your calories. How are you going to do that? All right? You need to be aware. You need to take in natural food, your fruit, your vegetable, your whole grain, multi-grain. You hear that in the news all the time, but you've got to make sure you understand that, right? Because those, they might have carb, but there's also, when we talk about carb, there's refined carb and there's natural carb, right? The carb that you take in, like white flour and all those are not healthy carbs. If you eat enough of those, you are going to burn up the calories really fast, and you're going to get hungry really fast, all right? So they're not a good carb. Now, the carb in the fruit and the vegetable, those are better carbs for you. And those are the ones you should target. And they have a lot of fibers, those type of food. So they're going to keep you hungry. They're going to keep you full a lot longer. You're less likely to snack if you're eating the right type of food. All right? Another thing that we all need to be aware of is your sugar-sweetened beverages like he was talking about. And I brought this because I don't know if you guys pay attention to how much you use, and you probably can't look at it, but you're welcome to come up afterwards. All right? In these soda cans, all right, they add just one common type of compound that, again, you probably don't pay attention to. It's called high fructose corn syrup. High fructose is 55% fructose. It's a type of processed sugar that they make. Right? They mix it with corn syrup because why? It's cheap and it's a goopy kind of thing. And they can add it to everything, your soda, your cookies, your muffins, your pies, right? And you could say, well, you know, just a little bit, I'll eat a piece of pie, that's fine. But it's in everything. Next time you go buy bread, go look at your bread. You will see that high fructose corn syrup is also in your bread. So you accumulate a little bit here, a little bit there, eventually it's gonna add up, and before you know it, you are going to end up being a victim. All right? So you gotta be aware of what you put in your diet, okay? So people think, and this is my family, I come home and I see this because, you know, I pay attention to all these details, and my sister would constantly give my nephew and niece fruit juice. And every time I tell her, she just think I don't understand. And, you know, she'll give him fruit juice, okay? And I was like, how many fruit juice should I give him in a day? Because she thinks it's healthy. Yes, it does have micronutrient. It has vitamin A, vitamin C, whatever it is in there. But the fruit juice also is a processed food, so they add high fructose corn syrup to the fruit juice. So if you give the kids enough, and they're not moving, and I see that in my nephew because he started gaining weight. And you can tell the beer belly issue, well, he's not beer in his case, but, you know, it's a belly issue, right? So I can tell he's getting the love handles, right? And then we'll talk to her about it, or they'll come down and she'll restrict them to like maybe half a Coke a day or 1 Coke a day. So it's something that really is the high fructose corn syrup. Again, it's a processed type of sugar that they add to everything that you consume, right? So you got to be aware of that, okay? So and for adults, when we talk about beer, really, alcoholic beverages, some of those are empty calories. They're high in calories, but they don't have much nutrient. They're not nutrient dense, right? So you need to be aware of that so you don't drink too many beer. All right? So we can another thing that you have to be concerned about, again, is, like Dr. Zimmet said earlier, is your salt intake. For a regular average person without any health issue, your salt should be about 2,300 milligrams or 2.3 grams, right? And if you have high blood pressure, then you need to reduce that to 1.5 grams. And you could say, well, and that's about this much, and I weigh it out so you guys can kind of see, so you can pass it around, you don't have to look at it, right? That's how much you should have per day. Now, if you go out to eat, you can say, well, I don't eat that much. But if you go out to eat and you eat a hamburger or French fries or whatever, they dump tons of salt on there. And so you don't know how much you consume in a day. So again, if you cook at home and you can control the amount of fat and salt that you put in, or carb, but if you are going to go out to eat, that's out of your control. And we are, as a society, we're a modal society, so we move around, we eat out a lot, and you can't control that, so therefore, again, it's another issue. Okay? So another thing I want to tell you about is limit your fat intake. Okay? Fat is important to some level because, again, you need some for the body to function. But there's 2 types of fat I want you to be aware of. The next time you go out and you look at one of these cans or one box of cereal or something, I want you to look at 2 types of fat and pay attention to how high they are. That is saturated fat and trans fat. All right? Saturated fat, think of saturated, it's solid, like animal lard. At room temp, it's solid. If you eat enough saturated fat, it's going to clog up your arteries and give you heart issue, health issue. Okay? The other type of, because saturated fat, you know what they do? You got heard of the good cholesterol and bad cholesterol? The saturated fat will increase your bad cholesterol. They increase your bad cholesterol, the LDL, low density lipoprotein. The other type of fat, which is worse than saturated fat, is trans fat. This is where they take good oil and they convert it to a form that's bad for you. And that's in food. All right? So what do? Trans fat it's a double whammy. Not only does it increase your bad cholesterol, it also lowers your good cholesterol. So when you go into the doctor's office and you say, I have cholesterol, I want to check my cholesterol, you want a ratio of good cholesterol to bad cholesterol. You want the good one to be high. That's your high density lipoprotein. And in your bad cholesterol, low density lipoprotein. You want the ratio to be high. But what it does is it decreases your good cholesterol and it increases your bad one. So you come out, it's hitting you from both sides. So you want to stay away from trans fat and saturated fat. Okay? All right, so here I'm just going to quickly say through this because we don't want to keep going on that. All right, what you want to do is lower your fat intake. And by just substituting, instead of drinking whole milk, You can either drink low-fat milk, or you can go toward plant-based milk, for example, like soy milk. That has lower fat because that's coming from soybeans. Okay? And again, choose food that are what we call nutrient dense. They are full of vitamins, minerals, dietary fiber. Choose those foods, not a natural food, not the type of food that will be processed food, like cookies, ice cream, pie, burgers. You can eat that occasionally, but don't make it a habit you're eating it every day. Fried chicken. Again, Southern, I love fried chicken too, don't get me wrong. All right, so this is what I want you to look at before in my last slide, all right? Is this. All right, most of the Food and Drug Administration expect that most of the box food or food that you buy should have this nutrition label on it, all right? And so how many of you actually read this carefully when you buy your food? Seriously, how many of you actually read it? All right, so some of you do. What about the rest of you? You just eat. All right? So first thing you should do is you should look at the serving size. This is 1 cup of, let's say this is cereal. I don't know what this is coming from. Let's say this is 1 cup of cereal. First thing you should look at is 1 cup has about 100 calories, and 20 of those calories comes from fat. Now, there's the fat. This is your macronutrient, your protein, your carbohydrate, and your carb. That's on top right here. This is your micronutrient, the stuff that are good for you, your vitamins, your mineral, that's down here. You should pay attention to these 2 panels. All right? Saturated fat should be 0 or low. All right? Trans fat should be 0. You can help it. Now, when I was doing research with this talk, there's one thing that I found that surprised me. I didn't know that before. When they say 0, I assume it's 0. But you know what I found out? It's not actually 0, because according to the Food and Drug Administration, or whoever makes this rule, if they have less than 0.5 grams, they can still write it as 0. Even though it's less or equal to 0.5 grams, they can put it on there as 0. So let's say you didn't know this, and if I look at this, I would say, oh, that's 0 trans fat, and I eat 5 servings of this thing. So that's, if let's say this has like 0.3, and they put it as 0.3 grams, and I eat 5 servings of that, I have just taken in 1.5 grams of trans fat. And remember, trans fat will lower your good cholesterol and increase your bad cholesterol. And you didn't realize that because of this label. So again, you have to be informed about your food. All right? You can't just assume, even with this label, I would trust it. I didn't know I couldn't trust it, but it actually said that 0. So how the heck would I know that this was not exactly 0? Unless, of course, I eat it in, apple or orange. I know there's no trans fat in that. All right? So that's the kind of thing you need to pay attention to. Sugar. These are, again, you want to make sure that those sugar are the good part, all right? Not the refined part, all right? Like fructose and all that they were talking about earlier. I was talking about earlier, okay? Codeine is actually good for you because, again, it will keep you full a lot longer. And of course, you want these down here, the numbers, to go up because these are your vitamin A, vitamin C, folic acid, calcium, iron, things that will make you your body healthy and is optimal for your health. Okay? All right. So I think it's very important that we are informed about our food choices. All right? We need to make sure we control the food portion. All right? And you want to make sure you choose nutrient-dense food. And then, of course, make sure that you exercise on a regular basis. And they found that if people just eat a meal and they walk, like I say, 100 steps or so, that you can extend your life a lot longer than if you just eat and then sit down in front of the TV or go to sleep. All right? So it's very crucial that we balance that. It's a balance. And I think, let me tell you something, just to leave an impression on you, and we don't need to could you turn that on for me? Yeah. I do want to tell you one last thing to leave an impression on you of why this is so important. All right? If I tell you right now, you come up and there's some food on this table where Dr. Isaac is sitting, and I say, and you want some food, I said, well, that food has been doctored or has some poison, a little bit of poison, maybe parts per million. It won't kill you, but there's a little bit in it. Would you eat it? No. Okay. Well, now think about that in terms of those chemicals, but in there, it's still in your food, but you're eating it. Why? Because as a society, we think it's okay because it's part of your food. So therefore, there's nothing wrong, so we can just eat it. But again, through accumulation of this trans fat, saturated fat, all of this, you can actually accumulate enough to do damage to your body. All right? So if you don't eat a poison, this is the same thing, but it's just a natural part of food, and so therefore we accept it as society and we don't question it. But that's why the next time you go to pick up something to eat, and that would turn me off now, because I love sweet, like anything else. Oreo cookies, I was in public the other day, pick up Oreo cookie bag, I look at one of the cookies and I look at the fat content, I decide, forget it, I'm gonna put it down. So again, I'm not saying you shouldn't eat, sometimes splurge, because again, that's what makes life, give a little bit of spice to life. But you've got to make sure that you make good choices overall. And you've got to make sure you have enough exercise to burn down the calories that you take in on a regular basis. All right? And I'll end with that, and if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Take that advice. Advice now, it's just a question, you have to do it. I passed around sign-up sheets, yellow legal pads. So what we do, we want everyone to sign so we can know who's here in our classes, but also the Board of Regents wants a number, or the people in continuing education want a number, and they send it up there. We have some time for questions. I mean, two interesting presentations, so I'm sure there's some questions. Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, but I do have something to say. On your last note, you said something about the little bit of poison in food. Actually, almost all our food does already have toxins in it, like the dyes and stuff like that. And they've actually found out that attributes to a lot of child behavior disorders nowadays, because the toxins affect kids more than it does adults.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, because I think as a society we put, you want to buy, you would think natural fish, but when I go into to buy some fish, the first thing I notice is they add natural color to the food, to the fish, to make it pink like salmon. And I look everywhere, and there's also preservative, and again, that's a whole aspect. And then even if you're eating healthy, as a society, we use pesticide. So unless you buy organic food, which again, you are going to, even if you're vegetarian, you're going to die of something, right? Because that's going to be pesticide that's on your fruit and vegetable. All right? And again, if you're willing to pay, now as a consumer, you have a choice. If you choose your food, you buy certain food, like Yoplait just recently take out all the high fructose corn syrup in many of their yogurt. Why? Because they know that the consumer don't want the high fructose corn syrup. You can choose. So by the choices you make on a daily basis, you can force the company to grow towards certain type. And so that's why the organic food industry right now, they're doing really well, because people are now going toward that direction. They're not buying just like hormone treated, and antibiotic treated kind of thing. That's why.
Okay, thank you. Is there another question?
Over here. Yes.
Yes.
It's for Dr.
Yeah.
Smedra.
Yeah.
You were talking about the population being Indian and native. What is the percentage of people having?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you were doing when I said this, but I said.
No, you were all.
I was over
on the
there.
other side of the room, so we kind of missed half.
I apologize, but I mentioned that even though the population is essentially divided in half, the percentage of people that suffer from diabetes is the same in both the indigenous population and the Indo-Fijian population. Thank you.
Okay. One more question. You have
We'll do the sign up after?
one more question, folks.
Oh, go that way, so that way they
Hang on,
can.
folks, we're not done yet.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, we're not done yet.
Go that way.
Phil, you have,
No, I just wanted to keep the people away until we actually finished.
okay.
And then my students, I'll have 2 sign-up sheets up at the front tables. Anything else?
Anything else? Oh,
Okay.
let me-
I think with the theater is really good, but do you have more extensive ideas about making these people do more exercise? Because they all, on all the pictures, they sit down and do nothing kind of. They're no walking people or Yeah, you said that they don't exercise much, but is that part of the project?
Most of the people that we saw, that you saw in these pictures, are farmers. And so getting farmers to exercise is, you know, it's,
What about the people from the city?
well, you know, that's why kind of we went to Lambasa, because there aren't, it's a rural area. Most of the people that we see are rural people. You know, if we in fact get an extension of this, or the government of Fiji wants to finance an extension, we'll go into Suba and try to do something about that. And, you know, Mr. Detita is probably working as we speak on a play that focuses on exercise, doing more than, you know, what a farmer does, what a sugar farmer does, which is what most farmers do all over the world. You know, they plant and there's an intensive season, but for, you know, 8 months of the year, they're drinking tea in this country rather than coffee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, let me thank you for your attendance, and have a good evening. And stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks.